We all want our welds to be pretty. Problem is, a pretty weld is not necessarily a good weld. One thing that can really help to develop a procedure or to adjust your technique and just get confidence in knowing what a procedure will do, one way to do that is with a cut and etch test, also called a macro etch. And that's basically where you cut through the middle of a weld, you polish it with finer and finer abrasives to a point that it's smooth enough, where the scratches are smooth enough, where some type of solution called an etchant will reveal the weld nugget. So you can tell the difference between the base metal and the weld metal. I did some videos recently, TIG welding steel and aluminum. So we're going to use those samples for this video. We're going to cut, polish, etch, and also we're going to show some examples from previous videos of pretty welds that weren't good. Let's do it. This first weld is plain carbon steel. It's a piece of tubing with an inserted flange on the end. Just a little fillet weld, but it's a 2-pass fillet weld. For the first pass, I'm using 1/16 ER70S6 filler wire, about 120 amps. And for the most part, I was just leaving that wire in the puddle with a little bit of pressure on it, feeding it if it wanted to take a little. It took a little. I'm going to swap over to a pink ceramic cup now because I'm going to walk the cup on that second pass. I'm going to go up to 332 filler wire for that second pass. Same exact amperage here. I just left the amperage on about 120, 121, went full pedal. Hadn't done any walking the cup in several years. It felt good to get back in it. Started to get my hand back in it, shake the rust off. The other weld we're going to test is an aluminum tube to plate in a 5F position, and my friend Andrew Carden was doing the welding on this one. This is a test he had to go certify on to make one weld in the field. And the difficulty in this test is you can't have any lack of fusion at the root. Kind of an interesting story on how and why he had to go take this test. I'll put a link right here where you can look that up and see the full video. Now we're going to test both of these welds by slice and dice. I've got a porta band, and the easiest way for just to cut into the cross section and then cut off a manageable area on both of them. Took just a few minutes to do that. But the next thing up, once they're cut, is polishing to get the rough saw marks out of there and get it smooth enough to where the saw marks or the grinding scratches won't interfere with inspecting the weld. 3M sent me this little care package here. I've had it on the shelf for months, and it's a series of Scotch-Brite roll-lock pads. I thought it'd be a great time to show that, because what we're going to do here is we're going to start off with an 80 grit sanding disc, and then I'm going to use those Scotch-Brite pads and then gradually step down to finer and finer grit and get a decent polish on this surface, and then we'll etch it, and then we can see the weld. So I'm starting off here now with the black, that's the coarse Scotch-Brite, and I'll fast forward through these really quickly. I'm going to gradually step down all the way to the blue colored, which is the finest. I've still got some scratches in there, but you can see that etchant really pops. I got it sanded fine enough where you can see exactly where that weld nugget is. So that one got in there. If you've ever taken an aluminum fillet weld test, let's say over 1/8 inch thick, it's tough to hit that root. And on that thickness, you're not really permitted any lack of fusion in the root. So we're stepping this down all the way to blue. Same thing as with the steel, but there's no need in showing all that. Usually you need a different etchant for aluminum than you do for steel. And I've got some aluminum cleaner here made by Dynaflux, and then also something easier to get is just Easy Off. Both of them seem to work about the same. As long as it's polished enough, you can make it work. And of course, using the editing software here, I can make it pop a little bit and show you exactly where that weld nugget is. So Andrew hit that root. Let's take a look at when a pretty weld is not necessarily a good weld. This first weld is a good one, 120 amps using 332 filler metal. You could go all the way down to 045 filler metal here, or all the way up to 332. I'm using 332. But I'm careful not to feed too much filler metal, and I'm dabbing and I'm watching in between dabs to make sure that puddle runs down into that root of the joint. And dabbing the filler wire on a fillet weld is definitely what I would recommend, because it turned out just like you'd expect it to. I punched in that root, no lack of fusion. That's what we want to see. But now here's an example of a pretty weld that's not necessarily a good weld. I'm using a larger filler metal, lay wire technique, and what that filler metal does, it acts like a big chill block. And you can't see the metal flowing down into the root. You hope it might be, but maybe it is and maybe it isn't. So lay wire with a big filler metal on a fillet weld like this is not necessarily the way to go. Let's chop that and take a look at it. This is where cut and etch testing is worth its weight in gold. One test is worth 1,000 opinions. That one got some lack of fusion. That dog won't hunt. Carbon steel is relatively easy to etch. It's really handy. You can test things like pushing versus pulling on your gun angle. You can test your MIG settings. And if you write some stuff down after you test it, you got a lot of confidence. You know what works. You know what settings will work. Here is a multi-pass stick weld done in the overhead position. If you prep it right, you can see every single pass and how they laid in there. Now on this carbon steel, I used a special passivation solution designed for stainless steels to etch, but good news, you can also just use some Loctite naval jelly rust remover. It takes a little longer, but it does work. It will reveal a weld nugget, and you can get it at any Ace Hardware or big box store. You can also order some PCB etch solution off Amazon, which works pretty good. Hey, thanks for watching. My online store is at weldmonger.com. That's how I support these videos. I would appreciate it if you'll head over there and give it a visit. There's a blog page there where you'll find videos that you won't find anywhere else. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.